So you want to study international relations and wonder if it's worth it? Let me share with you my journey, thoughts, experience throughout studying international relations and my career development since. My name is Viola, and I created iAlready to share knowledge, tips, and insights from international organizations as someone who worked at the EU, UN, and the OECD. And today I'm going to share with you how I got into these international organizations and my educational background. So if you're interested in studying international relations or you have graduated from international relations as well, you're welcome to keep watching. I'm going to be covering some of the positive experiences and some of the negative comments I have about studying international relations, the cost of my overall education, which was honestly pretty scary to calculate, and what I would have done differently looking back now. Let me give you some overall background about my educational journey. I studied BA in International Relations and Swahili at SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies, which is a part of University of London in London, for 4 years because my degree was a dual degree. So I had one additional year at universities in Tanzania and Kenya doing Swahili or Swahili related subjects. Then I did my master's degree in international security with a concentration on diplomacy and Africa at Sciences Po Paris School of International Affairs between 2018 and 2020. So in total, I spent 6 years studying international relations. As you can tell, even though I studied international relations, I had quite a particular focus from the very beginning on Africa, on Swahili, and on East Africa. And then when I moved to my master's degree, I expanded my focus on Africa as a continent, so also to Francophone Africa. So bear that in mind while I tell you about my experiences. Let me share with you the positive outcomes that I now look back on. It's 5 years since I've graduated, which, yes, is kind of crazy to think of. And I do have a couple of years of experience from the EU, UN, and the OECD. So yes, these degrees did get me a job in the exact sector that I wanted to work in, but we're going to get into that in a little bit. But let me tell you what I think was an incomparable advantage in comparison to some of the other degrees that I could have taken. Studying international relations really exposes you to knowledge about a wide variety of issues because you need to think about the world holistically. So in that sense, I think that you gain this very unique skill of looking at every single issue and country, comparing it to so many different other countries and sectors that you would know, and having that cross-cutting approach, which I think if you were studying, let's say, economics or history, you wouldn't necessarily have had. So I think while studying international relations, you look at a wide variety of issues. And while you may not be an expert in any of them, you know how to include it in your analysis, which I think is a very positive skill that you develop. In almost any international relations degree, you will need to write. So you will learn how to write clearly, concisely, and how to develop very good arguments and how to assess arguments. I remember before starting to study international relations, I actually studied law for a year because I thought that I wanted to have a legal career in Poland. And my experience studying law was very different from studying international relations. One of the key factors was the amount of writing that I have done in my degrees in international relations. So I have learned how to structure my thinking in concrete steps in papers, how to use a language to transmit the knowledge and the arguments that I have. So that has been a pretty intense training, especially that I started studying in my second language, in English, and I needed to write essays in English, which now I have published papers at the OECD in English, but at the very beginning, it was a really big struggle. So I not only learned how to write, I also learned how to professionally and formally write in English. You also get exposure to diverse political, economic, and all of the other systems. You really dive deep into the differences of possibilities and you start looking at the world through a very analytical lens, understanding that any country could have ended up differently if there was a different leader or if a leader made a different decision, which I think is very curious when you're studying international relations, because you learn so much about the world through the books that you start reading, for the conversations that you have, not only during your classes, but also with your friends who are studying international relations with you and are having different interests, while you also have particular topic preferences. I personally really wanted to study East Africa, and as a Polish person, I was never exposed to the history of Africa, to languages of Africa. Poland had nothing to do with Africa. And I really loved learning about state formation and how different political systems arose. You get so much exposure of working in a multicultural environment through not only your degree in the first place, because very often when you're studying international relations, you're either an international student or you have other international students in your year. So you learn through those connections in the first place. But then you also have different conferences, study trips. You study abroad like I did in Kenya and Tanzania. And the exposure to the world that you get is honestly unparalleled. I don't think you can get the same amount of diversity of opinions, political systems, if you haven't studied international relations. You get so good with your analysis. And that's something that I have noticed quite fast when I got a little bit more comfortable with writing and doing my own analysis. I started analyzing everything that I was hearing, any podcast that I was listening to about a particular political situation or a particular conflict, or when I was listening to traditional media, I could very easily spot what is a real argument and what is not, or what is a propaganda and what is not, and how people manipulate with the information that you have, because you are also taught how to manipulate information for your own benefit, which I do think is a very useful and practical skill. But you spot that in everything around you, which I think is super special. Network that you develop through studying international relations is honestly so inspiring. And this is something that was a really huge difference for me, because I saw a different way of living, thinking, learning, because of the people that I was surrounded by. And I will be forever grateful for that. And it has forever changed me as well. And if I didn't leave Poland to study international relations and the UK, Kenya, Tanzania, France, I wouldn't have been able to be the person that I am today. I am very open-minded thanks to these experiences. And on the other hand, you really learn how to discuss political issues. You learn how to discuss in general because of the writing and analysis that you do, because of the books that you're reading, because of the news that you're following. Studying international relations really teaches you how to discuss in a smart, calm, and persuasive manner. I have never done as much in-depth research as when I was studying international relations into topics that I have never heard of. And I love that. I really love that intellectual curiosity and capacity of being able to figure things out and to find innovative solutions, or what it feels like when you're a student sitting in the library for hours and hours and hours on end, reading books and thinking about how to improve the world and how to change it to be a better place. But I really loved how it enabled me and how much confidence it has given me in my abilities to figure things out based on my intellectual research. And I love the fact that, for example, I was doing a Swahili political analysis and comparing Kenya and Tanzania. Swahili praise poetry. It's kind of crazy to think of right now. I wrote a 5,000 essay in Swahili about the relationship between language and corruption in Kenya, doing interviews with Kenyans while I was living in Kenya. So I feel that I achieved so many things I don't think I could have ever achieved before. And studying international relations have definitely allowed me to do that. Let's talk about the obvious one, language learning. As I have mentioned, I come from Poland, and that's the only mother tongue that I have. I'm Polish and I speak Polish. But because I went to the UK to study international relations, my English is my main language right now. It's my professional language. And in fact, in the past 10 years, it is the language that I feel most comfortable in. I have also learned Swahili. It was a part of my degree and my professional languages as well, since I used it when I was working at the EU delegation to Kenya. And I have also learned French because I then studied in France. I used some of my French to do work on conflict analysis. Another thing that was an extremely positive and an extremely important experience for me when studying international relations was actually having exposure to the diplomatic environment through the different conferences, meetings. But one key moment of me studying international relations was actually working for the Kenyan president, Uhuru Kenyatta, during the Paris Peace Forum. That was insane. And I still think it was insane. I was so stressed about it. But this experience have completely prepared me for working in diplomatic environments and for learning how to behave among really high-level people, presidents, ministers, ambassadors, because I started being accustomed to being with people on such high level and working for them, working with them. And that allowed me to develop emotional intelligence that is crucial when working in international organizations, which was my personal goal when studying international relations. So that was definitely a highlight of my education related to international relations. And I would not have been able to have it if not for the university that I was studying at and the degree that I was studying at the time. Plus, of course, my knowledge of Swahili, because this is why I was selected to work with the Kenyan president. I have also attended and presented on a lot of conferences with presidents, ambassadors, ministers, and you start getting accustomed to having conversations, to talking about policymaking, to talking about priorities, to understanding how people think and realizing that you're going to be there one day, maybe not as a president, although who knows, but in positions where you do make these policies that change people's lives, and taking all these elements into consideration and talking to people is a very important aspect of it. Now, let's talk about the negative aspects of studying international relations. From my personal journey and from the universities I have studied at and the topics and subjects that I have picked, I don't think that I have enough numerical education. I know that there are some social sciences universities that focus on data analysis or having that numerical background, but that was not the case for me. And I do feel that it's a big thing that was missing from my general education. And I wish, as a part of the program, there are more numerical skills that were included in international relations as a field. Secondly, something that is very clear to me now is that there is no consistency over what studying international relations means. What do I mean by that? Both in terms of the universities that you're studying at, but also between countries, which in fact makes it very difficult to assess what kind of skills they actually have. And I'll give an example again from my own personal journey. I come from Poland and I actually studied law here before I moved to study international relations because I thought I wanted to be an international lawyer. But then I realized that I don't like the way that I was studying and I wanted to change it. And why I didn't like studying in Poland was because I was still learning as if I was in primary school, learning books by heart and needing to throw in facts and having a lot of knowledge that was stored in my brain, which at this stage of my development, I thought it was unnecessary. I didn't like the way that the educational system, in particular for law, was developed. However, in the UK, pretty much the only way that you're being assessed is through writing. You very rarely have exams, and even your exams are actually essays. On the other hand, when I moved to France, the focus was on giving presentations and writing, yes, but not academic papers. It was more related to writing a policy briefing or policy recommendations. It was not as academic as my university education in the UK was. Because I have been working many years post-graduation, I see that from the point of view of a recruiter, you're never really sure what that person who studies international relations, especially if there is no specialization attached to international relations, can do. So studying IR can mean many different things, and I don't like that there is no consistency across university. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that there is a very clear hierarchy in where it is worth to study international relations. To be honest, me studying at SOAS was not the most smart decision ever because I didn't know at the time that SOAS does not have so much value in terms of the quality of education. people who get into the careers that I wanted to get to in international organizations, that was my personal goal. Graduate from LSE or King's College, UCL, from Sciences Po, from Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge. And even though I managed to get in and I managed to have Sciences Po as a part of my degree for my master's degree, I didn't know that where you study matters a lot more than I wanted to admit to myself. Knowing that, would I have changed what and where I studied? Honestly, no, because my education at SOAS was literally the best thing that has ever happened to me. I think it was the most transformative moment of my career, and I literally have shivers talking about it because of how much it meant for me and how it shaped my career. So, no, I wouldn't have had, but maybe at that time, without knowing what I would have been missing, I would have made a different career. I chose to study at King's College or UCL, while at the time, especially after the experience that I had of studying law and not loving it, I really wanted to go with the voice of my heart and something that my soul really desired. I think I did pick well, and I did make the most out of the education and specialization. Another negative comment is that you do not have a straightforward career after studying international relations. If you think about it, when you study economy, you can become an economist. If you study history, you can become a historian. But if you study international relations, there's 1,000 different jobs that you could be doing. It could be a policy analyst, a program manager. You can do so much. And I don't think we're necessarily prepared for the different types of jobs that we can do. And we are not taught the skills that are necessary for these particular jobs. I think would have been better to align the degrees, the knowledge, the skills that you're gaining with the actual job market, because I don't think international relations as degrees do that well at all. My overall assessment about this experience is that I absolutely loved every second of it. I think that it matched very well with my personality, and it exposed me to so many different ideas, knowledge, new habits, new people, everything that was just fantastic. At the same time, I honestly don't think that studying international relations is enough for a very satisfying career. As I have mentioned at the very beginning, my education was not very traditional in terms of international relations, because from the beginning I specialized on Africa. And this is also how I managed to get my positions in international organizations, because I worked at the EU delegation to Kenya. So there was my connection to Kenya and speaking Swahili, and my connection to the region. I also worked at UNODC in Southern Africa. So again, my connection with Africa came into play. And then I worked as a policy analyst specializing on crisis and fragility at the OECD, which was also not only a result of my education on international security, but also all of the practical experiences that I have had from Africa as a region. So if I was to give you advice, is to try to find a specialization within international relations, because it will be very difficult for you to get a job with just an international relations degree with no specialization at all. Let's talk about the cost of my education. And honestly, it was the first time that I have looked at these numbers as a total number. And this has been very expensive 6 years when I look back at it. So I'm going to be giving numbers from that time that I was studying, which was again for SOAS from 2015, and then at Sciences Po from 2018. At SOAS, I spent 4 years, and each year in London was £9,000, and then a year abroad was around £10. That does not include any living expenses or travel expenses. So this is just tuition fees. So in total, my tuition fees for SOAS were around £29,000, for which I did take a UK government loan, plus the living expenses in London. For the living expenses, I actually worked all throughout my education, so I wasn't taking a loan for that. And also I didn't have financial supports from my parents throughout this time. I was working as a nanny, I was working as a teaching assistant, having a lot of different jobs basically to pay for living in London. I had zero support from my university because again, SOAS is pretty bad in terms of scholarships and supporting their students. So my living expenses both in London and then in Paris were covered by my own work while studying full-time. Then my education at Sciences Po, that's a little bit of a different conversation because I did get a scholarship when I was studying at Sciences Po. So I actually paid zero money for that. I have counted that it was 33,000 euros for 2 years of my time at Sciences Po. So this is what the education was worth at the time. Now, 1 year at Sciences Po cost 23,000, which is insane, honestly. And again, I did pay for my living expenses based on my own work. And I also got a very small scholarship. So I didn't need to work as much as I did when I was in London. I have struggled with identifying how much money my year abroad, study trip, winter schools, conferences, so including flights, accommodations, foods, tickets, things like this. And I was always very frugal with my traveling expenses. But still, if I think about those 6 years, I think it was around 10,000 euros. And those were the expenses that I have paid by working. Then there is another category of expenses that I also wanted to add because I have been very good from the very beginning in reinvesting in my skills. So, for example, if I had extra 50 euros or 50 pounds, I would reinvest it into, let's say, private classes with learning French. So, in terms of my language courses and overall skills development throughout that 6 years, apart from the university tuition fees, I probably spend around 2 to 3 thousand euros. So, in total, my expenses throughout the past 6 years for my education, and please bear in mind that I come from a country where education is free. In Poland, you do not pay a single złoty for where you're studying. For the 6 years spent abroad in London, Paris, Nairobi, and Zanzibar, I spent a total of 72,000 euros. That's pretty insane. Thank goodness I was working throughout these years. I probably covered half of these expensive, more actually. So the only loans that I took were for my education at SARS, and the rest of the educational experiences I have paid by either having scholarships or by working. Did it get me a job that I wanted? Yes. I have dreamt of working in international organizations. That's why I started my education at SARS. And that's also why I started a very particular specialization, because I thought that being able to specialize on a particular region with a particular language is going to help me with being a bit more distinct from other candidates applying for jobs in international organizations. And I am very, very, very glad, after all the money that I have spent on my education, to say that it has worked. And I did manage to work at the EU delegation to Kenya. Then I was working at the UN Office on Drugs and Crime in Southern Africa. And then I got a job at the OECD in Paris. If you're interested in working in international organizations, I have developed an online course for IOs and NGOs for people who are either at the beginning of their career or people who want to transition into international organizations. And I teach you how to strategically plan for you entering international organizations or NGOs in 5 different sessions. I'm going to link the program down below if you're interested in checking it out. Overall, I think studying international relations sparked a lot of curiosity in me, and that curiosity led me to learn a lot. It also built my confidence because I'm constantly exposed to situations that I have never been exposed to, and I adapt. So actually, having those adaptability skills have been something really crucial in my personal and professional development. And learning through people that I have been studying with has also been a really big positive element for me throughout this experience. I am really interested to know if you're considering studying international relations, and if so, at which universities, or if you have also studied international relations and did some kind of specialization. Please let me know in the comment down below. I would love to have a conversation about it. That's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!